Alright, another draft physics video presentation. DraftScience here on YouTube. Alright, so we're going to do another response video to AB Science, and we're going to talk about the double slit experiment again, some more, and just keep re-emphasizing the points that they just keep ignoring. And there's not much I can do about that. You know, really can't. You can just make a reasoned argument and you just get the same patronizing crap from the arrogant blowhards. And, you know, frankly, they've whitewashed a house and they just keep saying, no, it's a really excellent paint job and this house will last forever and blah, blah, blah. And it's just facade. The whole thing is phony and fake. The whole theory is mush defended with mush. I mean, the evidence is weak and feeble and barely even, twitching. And they're claiming all these claims about how this physics just can't be denied. Again, I can just keep quoting Professor Lewin. Nail in the coffin evidence. Shakar. Nail in the coffin evidence. These are the statements used. And clearly I've demonstrated at minimum, okay, it's not evidence of waves winning, okay, that there's other theories that are just as viable. And what I would still argue is that I've clearly pointed out how, no, I have excluded waves. Waves are now dead in the water. They can't be a viable explanation because the other explanations fit better and are simpler. And they win. Theoretical race. That's the standard. And they know it as scientists. They know that's the standard. Explain more simply, you win. Yeah, that's the definition of winning. Jamming explains, in the radar case, the two source case, clearly the simpler explanation, no singularities, no superpositions, no entanglement, no wave functions, no pilot waves, no multiverses. Just a simple explanation, you jam the receiver. It works, it fits the evidence, it answers the question, and yet they persist in saying, no, we have something special in the safe over there. Lewin didn't tell you about it, and Shakar didn't tell you about it, and Susskind didn't tell you about it because it's our special secret weapon, and we have to preserve it in the safe, and we can't let anybody see it. I mean, this is illogical mush. So anyway, so we're just going to be going over the same crap again because they're belligerently incapable of listening, caring, dealing with the real argument. I mean, it just very depressing. Very discouraging. Well, discouraging is right next to depression, right? Discouraging, depression, same kind of thing. So anyway, AB Science. Hi, Gary. Well, hi, whoever you are. Abe. Ebba. Thanks for pointing out the advertising thing. Okay, so yeah, sorry to imply. I kind of knew you weren't desperate for the money, but frankly, it is kind of silly putting ads on videos that get less than 1,000 views anyway. I mean, what are you making? 58 cents or something? I looked at the settings for the video and it is indeed excessive. Most people set mid-roll ads to automatic, but it sure seems that YouTube is being a bit greedy these days. So yes, I can understand how it's YouTube's discretion to play the game. Once you say, yes, put ads on it, they can put ads and do all kinds of wacky shit. So I understand YouTube is evil. I've actually pointed that out, in the past. Anyway, you talk about the double slit experiment on several occasions. Yes, I have, and you really aren't paying any attention to anything said in those videos, which is really quite irritating. Maybe you can imagine that that's irritating when somebody says, "Oh yeah, I've watched the video, but I didn't pay any attention." That's irritating. On several occasions, and once again, it is apparent that you haven't understood the math. Well, that's just a lie. Okay, what I have done is understood the math better in the sense that I've derived the answer to the question in a simpler form. and it's actually the correct answer. It explains everything, and your theory doesn't explain anything, and it does it in a convoluted way. This isn't about angles and, frankly, it's about dimensionality in the sense that you have a certain amount of space, okay, that distance between two objects, and they're going to radiate light. And the angles are incidental to that distance. The distance is everything. They're 2-point sources. Let's see how to put this. It's like arguing the field line argument in magnetism. Those lines are made by straight line vectors from the two magnetic fields, the south end and the north end. You can draw straight, dead straight lines, vectors, okay, and they'll tell you what the correct answer is. Now, yes, they have angles, but you don't need the angles to understand the straight lines. Just as you can do complex math to figure out that orbits are ellipses, or you could just put a piece of string, and 2 points in a piece of string and do exactly the same thing and understand that it's all just made out of straight lines. Straight pieces of string make the curved path. Anyway, haven't understood the math. The two-wave thing you are talking about is useful only if you want to figure out where the bright and dark spots should be. Well, that's frankly the whole game, is the pattern and describing how it's formed and getting it correct. And so that's just gibberish in this conversation. Obviously, everybody's attempting to describe why the pattern exists and how the pattern is formed. And so it doesn't make much sense to say that this fake math is only for faking the fake of the fake. I mean, what are you saying? Why is there a generalization, or whatever you want to call it, a superficial version of the analysis that is completely inaccurate, doesn't have anything to do with the truth? So why are you making any justifications for physics professors wasting time on something that's a placeholder for the truth at best, and it doesn't have anything to do with the reality? Like you said, you have the better book here. Why are you reading from the bad version? The first edition, when the fourth edition, the guy corrected all the mistakes in the first edition. So why are you defending the fact that all the physics professors are talking out of the first edition? They keep pretending Young has something to do with this. When Young's analysis is immature at best. You could just say it's his analysis is ignorant. Young didn't even understand what the pattern was. So why is he relevant? He wasn't even predicting the right pattern. And they're teaching it as if Young discovered the phenomenon. When we know Newton discovered it. So again, you're not answering any of these questions. So this is just more blah, 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 blah. You're stupid. I'm smart. Blah, blah, blah. And I proved it by just saying I'm smart and you're stupid. No, sorry. I mean, maybe some people will buy that, but I'm not buying it. Yeah, you have to do a little better than that. All right, anyway, the two-wave thing. So I love that he calls it that, the two-wave thing. The two waves thing. Yeah, it's like maths. Okay, yes, the two waves thing. Yeah, that's how every single physicist in third year, okay, we're talking about third year of college, and they're still talking absolute rubbish because we know the pattern can't be made by two waves. Can't happen. Two waves don't work. Period. And period. Period, 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 period. Two waves don't work. All right, anyway, figured out the bright and dark spots should be. Obviously, it doesn't work. That's the whole point. It won't figure out where they'll be. That's the whole point. Now, you're asserting it will. No, it won't. You have zero evidence that it will. There's not one single person doing the experiment with any kind of clinical accuracy and showing how the double wave math works by measuring it. Actually measuring it. Because, frankly, it doesn't work. And it will only come close in very special circumstances where, if you get the distances just right. And again, you know that the the double slit math that they do often doesn't even contain the distance of the actual slit width. The math is only using the impediment width. So they should call it the single impediment math, because it doesn't have anything to do with the slit width. Okay, anyway, because they assume the slits to be non-wavelength long. They're so tiny they don't have any wavelengths. That's why so they don't add any measurable distance to the point sources. They don't make the point sources move very much, so therefore we can ignore it. It still won't be accurate. Okay, it does not predict the whole pattern. So frankly, you just conceded the point. So you have a diagram, a model, okay, and it doesn't work. It doesn't fit. It isn't an explanation. It's not a drawing of the actual animal. Okay, so you've just done some sort of platypus thing. You know, you're just faking it. And that's what your physics is doing. And you're saying it's okay for them to fake it. It's okay for them to deceive their students and make them think this is about two waves when it has nothing to do with two waves. And so you've conceded the argument, in my opinion. You've conceded that the pattern is not explained by wave theory. Okay, this is described by the Fresnel equations. Fresnel. Okay, so again, I've been over it, and the fact is the Fresnel equations are not a drawing of waves. So you won't see it done as waves, because the waves are in locations that make no sense. So let's go over this again. I mean, it's just kind of overtly, simplistically obvious. Even Ken Wheeler might concede. The Fresnel math has two variables in it. This distance, okay, and this distance. So it's now created, okay, two variables. And the two variables are these points. And what it does is create integrals to measure, okay, a bunch of vectors from those distances. But it's from those distances. Now, say if you were going to do this comparison, you could go, well, let's compare this vector to this vector. And then we'll do this vector to this vector. And then we'll do this vector to this vector. Okay, and so this is what you're integrating. Because technically, to get the whole pattern, you have to go through all these permutations. But what you're really doing, okay, so the shortcut, the better derivation, is to understand that you're just creating an arc in space. Okay, there's an equal distant point. Okay, and on that arc, okay, these are necessarily straight lines, by the way. Okay, this is the actual starting point for the arc for each point source. So what I really wanted to get to was just the fact that if you were to think of these things, these point sources as waves, it would mean you'd have to draw the wave over with the surface as the middle of the wave. I mean, can you see that? I mean, should I make that bigger so you can understand the surface is here, right? And their wave comes out like this. So somehow the wave knows to break here for no good reason. And somehow it knows how to go over the surface. This is the center of the wave. Understand that the whole point of the waves going through the slit is to create these arcs. Okay, the arcs are what's creating the pattern. And where you place those arcs is critical. So obviously the two-wave solution doesn't work because these arcs aren't at the distance the math is using. So it wouldn't make any sense. It can't possibly be illustrating the pattern. So anyway, the simple truth is that these two distances represent a number of wavelengths that fit in them, that you could just draw lines. So you could just represent it as what you're really comparing, what you're really creating is these two, okay, points, and these 2 points are going to create the pattern. That combination. So all 4 point sources are involved, and there's a certain place on here where both of these will be in phase. And when both of them are in phase, you'll see a light spot. Now what's really happening is they're just taking this distance and saying how many wavelengths fit into that distance. And it'll be a lot more than would fit into this distance, right? So you're just comparing these two distances. And so on this arc, this little distance will create big blocks. And again, the blocks have to start from where the straight line goes, not where you say, where's the center of those two straight lines. That's not where the arc starts. So I guess the best way to say this, okay, is to illustrate it this way. I mean, with the lines. So all you're doing is creating lines, right? You're creating a line from here, all right, to here. And then you're comparing it to the line from here to here. Okay, so you're comparing the length of these two lines. And those two lines, as you go up, as you arc up, are going to change and become equal length. So but they're only equal length at, I understand, they're equal length here and here. Now this might only be a millimeter of distance, but the fact is the center of that is not a true fringe. It's not a maxima. It's a tiny little maxima. It's a little tiny one, because the real truth is the two vectors are going to be from here to here across that millimeter. That's the real starting point, and the real starting point is actually, okay, a dark. Okay, they're out of phase, and they're becoming in phase. So you have to kind of understand that there's only one little tiny place where they're perfectly in phase, and the rest of the light is a little tiny bit out of phase, a little tiny bit out of phase, a little tiny bit out, it's a little less of phase. And the darks are just really where, okay, now you're really out of phase, completely 90 degrees out of phase. Okay, so now you're dark because you're so out of phase. So the two waves are exactly the opposite. One's up and one's down, if they were thought of as waves. And if they were thought of as actual particles, that didn't show up, so I knew I should have moved this over. My bad, such. So I mean, the particle view would just be that this is completely out of phase. Now, as soon as I move one of these to change its phase at all, then I'm going to be becoming more in phase. So you go from being completely in phase to completely out of phase, back to completely in phase. And that's the real pattern. And the truth is that this distance has a certain number of wavelengths in it, a total number of wavelengths. And all you have to do is put that is this distance, you just put that on this curve. But you have to start it at this 1 millimeter point, and you start it with a dark. That is, it's dark and getting more in phase. And so, because these two lines, you can see this length difference here. So let's say this distance was, when I say this distance was 10, 0.5 wavelengths. So when I divide the wavelength of the light, 500, into this distance, 500 nanometers, I get 10.5. That means I have a 0.5 left over. I have a remainder. Well, that remainder is going to be here at the 90 degree point. Okay, so that's where the remainder starts. And you go 0.5, and then you start your pattern. And then you have a standard pattern, a standard distance all the way across here. That will be all of your wavelengths. And the last one will be right here at number 10. Okay, and that's going to be out of phase. So this is really your first in phase. That's why the center maxima is larger, is because it's really made, okay, you can't see that. It's really made, so the center maxima for the internal slit is big because it's really made out of two arcs that are going over here and over here. And you have the little fake maxima in here that fills this with bright light. So it looks like it's just one big lump, but it's really made out of this lump and this lump, and this little millimeter in between is very bright. So it just fills this in. So that's why it's a double. It's because this is your zero. This is where you're starting, and this is where you're finishing. So anyway, the point is that the geometry is quite simple. These two create one pattern, okay, the little one. These two create, because there's very few wavelengths, there's very big notches, very big notches, very big notches. So this is all light. This is all light. Okay, and when the 4 point sources are in phase, you'll see a photon. Where 2 of the point sources are not. This is an X, no light from these 2 sources are producing out of phase light to these 2 sources, dark. And then it gets light, then it gets dark. So that's the 2 patterns. I'm not perfectly satisfied with that description in the sense that, but you know, a physicist should be able to understand what I just said. Anyway, so I'll highlight other points, but the simple, you don't have to do all this sine theta stuff. You don't have to worry about the angles. This arc will tell you exactly, okay, the arc created will tell you exactly, okay, what the wavelength is of your pattern. So whatever number of wavelengths you have in here, you're just putting it on this longer line. So all you have to do is multiply this by 1/2 pi, okay, and it will tell you the conversion from this little line to this big line, to this longer line, based on the distance. So you just take this radius. What's the radius? You multiply that times 1/2 pi, and it'll tell you what this longer line is, how much longer it is. And it'll tell you exactly how big your wavelength differences will be. So you're just taking whatever wavelengths fit in here, and you're just putting it on this longer line. And that's it. That's all that this is. So that's the simple derivation. You don't need to do all these angles. You just need to understand this line will represent this line perfectly. They're completely proportional to each other. And all you're doing is taking whatever pattern is on here, Daffy Duck, and you're just putting Daffy Duck on the bigger line. And that's it. Not complicated at all. All right. Let's see. This is described by the Fresnel, that's correct, equations, and the particular solution for the double slit experiment is blah blah cosine sine blah blah x. The fact is that the equation has exactly what I just stated in it. It has the distance of the impediment and the distance of the 2 outside surfaces. Those are the point sources. Those are the variables in the math. So don't be fooled by any notion that the math has something else in it, because it doesn't. Those are the relevant distances. They will be divisible by the wavelength or divided into the wavelength. You can do it either way. One way creates a percentage. One way creates how many fit inside. Same difference. That's exactly what will be done in the math. So this whole thing, like there's some special math that makes this all okay. No, it doesn't make it all okay, and it doesn't make wave theory all okay. The point sources are clearly in the wrong location. They're not in the center of what you claim to be the waves. Draw the waves. Draw the 4 waves and admit the truth. Okay, that they're in the wrong places to make your theory work. All right, this is exactly what we observe. So again, you keep telling me what you exactly observe, and there's not a single piece of evidence on the internet showing this observation. So you can keep saying you observe it. It doesn't happen the way you're saying. It doesn't work. It never has been clinically done. It's just a story you tell. Just like the story where Professor Lewin says, I can open a second slit. Okay, this is a story you tell. Or the single photon experiment. I've already shown how that's a sham. Okay, the Veritasium video. Just tell me, okay, AB Science, you're a smart guy. Explain to me why Veritasium has the photo multiplier turned all the way up. Okay, I mean, you can have it on get real photons. Okay, get real photons. You can have it on that setting, or you can have it on ludicrously high. You'll see photons everywhere. You can be in the darkest box in the universe and you're still going to see photons because you have it turned up all the way. So why don't you explain why in the video Veritasium chose not to put it on get reliable photons and instead turned it to the preposterous and ludicrous setting where he's getting 7 error photons, right? I mean, anonymous, who knows where photons. Even though he's got the whole thing shielded in a cloak of invisibility, It's still picking up 7 erroneous photons per second. It's turned up so outrageously high. Now, why don't you explain why he had it set that way? Why would a rational person doing the experiment say, I'm going to turn the detector up to the ludicrous setting? Yeah, ludicrous is a great way to detect stuff. I'll put it on ludicrous. Ludicrous photons. So you're dead in the water on that one. Clearly, Veritasium isn't an idiot. Clearly, he couldn't get the experiment to work unless he put the detector on stupid and moronic. So he had to put it on the moronic setting or it didn't work. The fake, phony bullshit setting. I have to put it on bullshit because if I don't put it on bullshit, I don't get it to work. Force it to work. That's the setting. Force the experiment to work setting. When the other big lie that's out there is they say, okay, we did this, we're going to do this slit experiment, and we've got little magical doors on here, and we'll open and close the doors, right? And so they have one of the doors closed. Okay, so they close this door, and they're only getting light out of this door, right? This door's open, so only light can get through here, and it's shooting through, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and then I open this door, see, and there's places where it's light. Okay, and it's light here, and there's light here. And now I open magical door number 2, right? I flip that open, and all of a sudden the light that was here goes away. It magically disappears, and it no longer exists. So there was a photon going there, and somehow this door being open knocked that photon into death. It annihilated it and, deconstructed it. It destructively interfered with it and shot it over there, did something else. Anyway, never done. There's no evidence of any experiment that ever did this. Okay, that said, okay, look, I opened the door, that went dark. No, what happens is this goes 4 times brighter. This goes 4 times brighter. This goes 4 times brighter. Okay, so everything else next to this spot goes 4 times brighter. So obviously this looks darker, okay? But what it is less bright. This isn't 4 times brighter, okay? This is still 1x. This is 4x. Obviously this looks dark now, but it's not really dark. This is all part of your fable. Okay, and you won't even admit, oh yeah, some of this smells like a fable. You're sitting here just doubling down saying, no, this is all good science. You won't even admit, again, I've played the professors, every single one of them. They can't make the drawings accurate. They can't say what the real truth is. And they're college professors. Why should a college professor in physics do any analogizing or generalizations without clearly stating, I'm just talking bullshit here. Okay, this is virtual reality. This isn't the real thing. I mean, maybe they did that. Maybe where you went to college, they said this is just an abstraction and it works, but it doesn't have anything to do with the truth. But the joke is, it doesn't even work, is the funny part. They draw something that's completely different than what their math is saying. All right. All right, however, the math is tedious by virtue of having no, whatever the hell that is, is tedious by virtue of having to treat each infinitesimal length element. So here we go, this infinitesimal word. You mean infinitely number of Huygens point source thingy? That won't fix anything at all. So again, that's more just bullshit, right? Huygens existed in like 1650, right? I mean, that's, in his prime, or 1670. I mean, Huygens was a long time ago. Why didn't Young know about Huygens if Huygens was the right answer? Why didn't Young, instead of Young doing this, okay, hey, there's 2 waves, blah, 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 and they interfere and they create the pattern. Instead of doing that, why didn't he say, oh no, that's Huygens, and there's a infinite number of point sources inside of here, and an infinite number of point sources inside of here, and this creates actually 2 different, okay, I have a remainder. I have 2 things left over when all of these things magically like say I have a bunch of points, okay, and they're odd and even, odd, even, odd, even, right? I guess that has to be odd, even. I can say, well, these two cancel, and then these two cancel, right? And the only ones left are this one and this one because they don't cancel, right? Or something like that. They do this fake notion. They take the slit and they basically cut it in half. This is to do the single slit, right? So they do the single slit and they say, well, they have to make two waves. So how do you make two waves? Well, I'll just put a fake barrier in here and just pretend there's two waves here and here. Well, that doesn't actually work. They actually have to put the waves here and here. So they have to have, again, the wave has to go over the surface. But that won't be in the math, right? The math is saying this is the point source and this is the point source. So they keep lying that they're drawing Huygens or that they're representing Huygens. The math will not represent Huygens. It won't do any such thing. It won't make anything rational out of this equation except say this is the point source. This, I'm going to compare this vector to this vector. Clearly, that's the math. You're comparing two point sources that are creating vectors to different locations. The point sources are not the wave centers, clearly. And if you drew it honestly, you'd have to draw preposterously located waves. And you don't do it honestly because that would be obvious. Everybody would see the waves are in silly locations and they'd say, those are silly waves. You can't make that argument. You can't make the argument there's an infinite number of point sources along the surface here. That the photons went through the surface and came out of the surface and made waves over here. You can't make that argument. So, it's just a lie, and it can be seen to be a lie because they change the rules. When they go from the single slit to the double slit, what do? They say, okay, there's two waves here, and then there's two waves here, right? And then now he's just saying that, no, we just Huygenized this and Huygenized this, and then we create four waves. And again, it's four waves at 4 point sources. The 4 point sources are the surfaces, just as my theory suggests. This whole pattern is created by scatter, and that's all you need. You don't need anything more complicated. The light scatters off the surfaces, and that creates the pieces of photon. You just add up the pieces, and if they're in phase, you have light. If they're out of phase, you don't have light. So out of phase, no light. All right. Okay, let's see. The double slit experiment. Okay, we did that. Where's the tedious part? The math is tedious by virtue of having to treat each infinitesimal length element between the edges of the aperture as a point source and having to integrate over the aperture for each point on the detector. And that's not what the math is doing. So again, he keeps saying that's what the math is doing, but that's not what the math is doing. Clearly, the math is taking point sources and taking angular vectors from those point sources. There's no point in continuing to fudge it or lie about it or all that crap. Nowhere in the math does it do any kind of integral over an infinite number of point sources that aren't completely inside the exterior ones that are the real point sources. So the integration doesn't have anything to do with changing the real fact that if you were to draw what the math is doing, the drawing would be the wave is over the surface. All right, so this part is the real revealing part. Okay, this is where you get to the heart of this whole thing. I have considered doing a video on this subject. So let's understand, every single video on the internet is wrong. Okay, there's not a single video anybody can point me to that does it correctly. Not a single one on the entire internet. Not a single video that can hold up to scrutiny. Because somebody would have given me the link by now, right? I've been begging for the link for 3 months, begging for somebody to send me a link where it's done accurately, correctly, precisely. Not a single solitary link provided. All right? I've done Shakar. I've done every single professor that's online. I've done college professors. I've done whatever you call them, talking heads, the Brian Greens, the Sean Carrolls, clueless nonsense. Right? So this is an experiment completely butchered by every single physics person who has ever discussed it on the internet. Every single one of them. I could say 99%, right? We'll just cover our base. 99% of all the doctorates of physics, it doesn't matter what they have written books, they are king of the universe of physics, they are icons in physics. Not a single one of them has described this experiment correctly. And yet he's saying, nah, I don't feel like doing a video. The world doesn't need it done right. Who wants the video where it's done right? Who the hell cares? It's not an important experiment. It's really so fucking irrelevant. It's not like it's a cornerstone of singularities and superposition and entanglement and multiverses and pilot waves and randomness and no, it's the origin of all that bullshit. It's done completely wrong. If you won't make the video, give me the fucking link of somebody doing it right. Give me the link to the video where somebody does the fucking analysis correctly, where they just don't completely bullshit. Okay. So it's hilarious. This is just such a cop-out. He knows I've made this accusation. He knows things like the Dr. Quantum video is out there. It's complete oh, when you're not looking at it. Ooh, oh, you turn the detectors off. They're still there, but you turned them off. And the photons, no, you're being sneaky. I mean, complete bullshit's out there. That's what's out there. Complete bullshit. And he's disinterested. But I decided that it just isn't interesting enough. So isn't that the statement? I mean, and I guess it wasn't interesting enough for any scientist to ever redo the Eddington experiment, even though it's a principle of your physics that you redo things, that you prove through redundancy that the results weren't an aberration or a lie or a failure or an error, that you redo it to prove it. Nah, we don't need to do that. That's not all that scientific. They just say that's scientific. It's not really scientific. Real science doesn't bother repeating anything. That's no fun because you find out you're full of shit then, and that's no fun. We like being full of shit. So anyway, it's just an amazing statement, right? I mean, here I am in a void. I'm telling you quite overtly. He's telling me I need to understand. I need to do this. Who do I get my instruction from? Who's going to instruct me on the proper way to understand the experiment when I've demonstrated that every single person who's called an instructor is not doing it right? Yeah, there's not much hope here. The results of the double slit experiment have been done to death. So here we go. Yeah, done wrong. Done by silly, retarded analysis. Again, the two-slit analysis without even putting the dimensions of the slit in the math. So you just completely ignore how wide the slit is, and we know that's critical to what the pattern's going to be. So this play a game. You're just playing a game, just evading the point that this is horrible physics. It's horrible science. It's so cobbled together nonsense. You just keep using this imaginary notion of the infinitesimals. Like that's a physics term, infinitesimal. I mean, why don't you just talk about spontaneous next? Well, and then you can do random, right? Yes, well, you already did that. You already made random part of physics. You have a real random generator somewhere. It creates real randomness without any causes and effects. Sure it does. I mean, this is, all I can say is this is a pathetic statement by him that this doesn't need to be done right. Nobody needs to do it because we've done it to death. So he's conceding in a sense, I'm right, that the superficial analysis is junk. He didn't say that, but he's sort of conceding it. Oh, but he's saying we have the special right book and the secret space safe. So yeah, we have real physics somewhere. We just don't show it to the world because the world isn't ready for the real physics. I mean, what's your argument here? They've all done it wrong. And you're saying, I don't need to do it right. Nobody needs to. We don't need a video where it's done right. Why does the internet need that? Ooh, creepy. All right, anyway, the results of the double slit experiment have been done to death. It's just so bad. And the maths to fully explain it is just too damn boring. Well, I'm just saying, okay, that's the statement you're going to make. Creating a coherent connection between your wave model and your mathematical model, you don't think is something you need to do. You can just whitewash. You can just tell people it's a wave, even though your math says it's not a wave. Your math doesn't have any waves in it. So it's almost like the Maxwell's equations. They keep calling them wave equations. There's no waves anywhere. Okay, there's a lot of straight lines. Not any fucking waves. Anyway. It's just too damn boring. So again, that's his statement. There's not much to say, right? He's bored by the getting it right, and he likes the simplifications and the abstractions. We don't need to know what it really does. We'll just pretend it's gremlins. Gremlins are fun, and so we'll just use gremlins instead of virtual photons, or instead of spin. Okay, so instead of talking about boring spins, let's just call it gremlin juice. Gremlin energy. It's pathetic. Anyway, maths fully explain it. It's just too damn boring. But the headline points are in the above paragraph. Well, again, we read the above paragraph. There's no headline point. You haven't in any way debunked the fact that the math has point sources in it, and it's comparing vectors from point sources. It's not doing anything other than comparing vectors from point sources. And the point sources are not in the location the waves would be. They're in the locations one could argue scatter would be created from. Clearly, there's no reason for the wave to be created where it goes over. Okay, say I have water here and I have sandbar here and I shoot a wave in. There's no reason to think the wave is going to be created here. It's not logical. All right. Just spend some time learning the theory. So again, this is just more, I can just, well, I am. I'm going to directly make assertions about your character and your intelligence, because that's just silly. I mean, obviously I've spent an awful long time trying to find a right answer. I've played Professor Lewin's, all of his videos on the subject. I mean, the 802, the 803, the 803X. Okay, I did Shakar. I did Green, and I've done Sean Carroll, and I've done, what's the bald Iranian guy? Well, whatever, him. He's really bad. So I've gone to all these sources looking for the answer. So this is just such petty bullshit that I need to do more. I have to do more work to understand. No, I don't have to. I've done my job. You haven't done your job. Okay, anyway. So let's go back to him considering doing a video on the subject and it being too boring. Well, I'm sitting here saying to you, okay, I'll pay you for your time. So just tell me what your price is. How much do I have to pay you to do this boring, tedious task of explaining how it's a wave model when the point sources are in the wrong place? I mean, I don't really need you to do the integrals, because we know the integrals aren't changing where the point sources are. The integrals are just taking a bunch of vectors from those point sources, so we don't need to do that. I already have the answer, all right? I already have the right answer for the fact that the vectors are always going to have to create a point in space, okay, on an arced line. And that arced line will reveal perfectly where constructive and destructive will take place based on a distance from the target. So, I mean, it's already explained just by geometry. I don't need to do an integral. It's useless to the answer, okay, because we already know where the pattern is and what it's being created by. And it's being created again by straight lines from point sources. So how can you change that with your math? How can you do anything in a video to change the fact that if you are honest to the math, you have to concede the wave point sources. The point source of the wave is in clearly the wrong location. You just keep doing. I mean, it's just so dishonest. I mean, he's smart enough to know this is a dishonest answer. I mean, really, he's smart enough to be able to realize that, yes, the point sources are the surfaces. And you can't draw waves there. It just doesn't make any sense. All right. Anyway, so just tell me, how much do I have to pay you? I said it in the video, okay? I'll pay you to bore yourself to actually make a correct video on the internet. I'm going to finance the creation of an accurate video on the double slit on the internet. So there's one accurate video somewhere. So when people talk about it, you can go, hey, wait, no, don't buy that. No, there's an accurate video, and here's the link to the accurate video. I'm going to finance it. The accurate video will be on your channel, so everybody will be linking to it because, hey, there's the accurate video. So all of this confusion, all of this, do you have any questions? They're all going to be answered in this great video you're going to make. And I'm going to pay you to make it, and you're going to get views for it, and you're going to get money for it, and you're going to be famous for it because you made this accurate video. So, and you still won't do it? I think that's suspicious. I think that indicates something like tail between legs running away. Okay, that's what you, maybe you can do the math for that. You know, maybe you can give me the infinitesimal, I mean, what would you get? The integral over the infinite number of places the dog tail could be in, as it moves from straight up to under the legs. Okay, anyway. All right, just spend time learning the theory. I mean, I'm pointing out your theory is absolute rubbish, and everything you've built on is absolute rubbish. You have no clue about physics because you've made all of these wrong assumptions. You got plus and minus wrong, you got wave particle wrong, you got momentum wrong. Momentum isn't frequency, by the way, it's just stupid. Okay, Volkswagens don't have a frequency. Human beings don't have a frequency. It's just silly, mushy bullshit. It has nothing to do with reality. All right. Anyway, but before uploading, let's see. Spend some time learning the theory, and if something doesn't make sense, then you should question it. What's the point? I've been deleted at every, science discussion board just for even suggesting it's worthy of a bit of conversation. You're not allowed to discuss it. Okay? What's being clearly demonstrated is that my intelligence is being insulted because I'm discussing it. So this is just bullshit. Baldy Cat says I'm a clueless asshole full of crap. That's the extent of his analysis. That's how well he answered my question. I say link me to a video doing it right. Did he do it? That's not asking too much from anybody, right? I mean, even if I'm the most despicable shithead on earth, right? What's that? I mean, that doesn't cost you anything, sending somebody a link. Shit. I mean, this is just so fucking bogus. Anyway, and if something doesn't make sense, then you should question it. But before uploading nonsense, so he's saying this is nonsense. Pointing out this simple facts is just wasting time doing nonsense. Pointing out the fact that their math doesn't fit their diagrams. Pointing out that they do make silly mistakes. I mean, look, this is a silly mistake, but I mean, I made it too. I was under this certain impression that this wave thing starts in the middle, right? So you have two slits, right? And you know, everybody makes this mistake. I mean, it takes some thought to realize, oh yeah, it's bullshit. Okay, so you have these two slits, and the thought is that if I'm going to compare two vectors, I go straight line here and a straight line here, and this has to be in phase, right? I mean, the middle of this line has to be in phase. But wait a minute. Okay, this is really the straight line, and this is really the straight line, and this is just a tiny little millimeter place. This is a tiny place where it's in phase. Because as soon as I start going this way, all of a sudden I'm going to hit this line. And this line is the zero for here. This is the zero angle. Okay, this straight line. This isn't zero. This is a negative angle. See, all the rest of the angles are going to be positive, 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 positive. This is a negative angle. Okay, this isn't really part of the true vectors. So when I take this line and connect it to this line, I'm going to be out of phase. This isn't going to be in phase from this point. It doesn't, it's not going to be gradually out of phase here. No, this is the starting point of a node. And then this will be the, this will be the on node. So it's the starting point of the on node. And then this will be the off node. And this will be the on node. And this will be the off node. All right? That's where it starts because it has to finish here. Again, if it was 10.5, if the distance is, 10.5 wavelengths fit in there, there's a half a wavelength. The half has to be here. This is where the half is. Okay, so the full has to start here. All right, anyway. So it's deceptive. There's little tricks to this thing. And here you are saying, I'm ignorant. Yeah, very unfair. All right. It's okay. No, I'm talking nonsense. So anyway, before uploading nonsense onto YouTube, so that's what he's calling it. Asking these questions and pointing out the inconsistencies in your theory. The point, the simple arguments are, if this had anything to do with waves, then there would be a consistency. The water waves would create the complex pattern. They don't create the same pattern in the double slit. The fact is, water waves don't create an interference pattern in the single slit. Nothing like light again. The comparisons suck. The analogy doesn't work. It's not the same thing. Okay, it's not a wave. All right. And before you start uploading nonsense onto YouTube, take a moment to think about whether or not you have fully grasped the concept. So again, I can only grasp the concepts by, again, there's the clear evidence is, and I don't know how he's missed this, but I have done hundreds now videos on this subject, and over time I have played every single professional, decent, well done, I don't know, credible double slit video on YouTube. I've played them in my videos. I mean, where do we get this grasping of the concept except from these people, and they can't draw it correctly to save their life? Feynman's drawings are ridiculous. Do you stand by them? Do you stand by the Feynman lecture? All right, this is important because right now you come across as someone who is too arrogant. So again, I'm sitting here asking for the argument. All right, I'm sitting here quite confident I have the argument, and that's called arrogance. I'm willing to argue it. You're the one saying, oh, it's too boring. It's not an interesting enough subject for me to sit there and show you how to do it right. And you won't even provide the link to the video that does do it right. So even if we were going to say, okay, it's boring and it's already been done to death, well, just link me to the video you say is correct, that's accurate, that has scientific integrity. Show me the video that with scientific integrity demonstrates how wave theory works. To have entertain the notion that he has understood something. Okay, too arrogant. You come across as someone who is too arrogant to have entertained the notion that he has misunderstood something. The channel's called Draft Physics, so I have made mistakes in progressing through this whole adventure. And the adventure was started by the double slit. I have to admit, the silly Copenhagen bullshit and the pilot wave bullshit and the many worlds bullshit were just such silly interpretations that you had to say, no, the truth has to be something else. And that's why I went on this adventure. And then it started with particle gravity, because gravity makes so much sense. Mach gravity works. And all you have to do is deal with the drag problem. And then I can just point out to you, you should know this stuff, that electrons and protons do get dragged to a halt. So drag is a real thing. It actually does happen. And only certain kinds of little machines can take advantage of their pressure and their energy to create little motors to keep moving through the drag. But anyway, that's a whole nother subject. And so I've unified physics, by the way. I mean, I really have. I've explained magnets and done all that stuff, and it all fits together, and it's really simple. 2 plus 2 plus 2 physics. I have an explanation for gravity that just kicks ass. I mean, it completely blows it up. It's so obvious and simple. Yeah. Yes, why would I entertain the notion that I've misunderstood when everything fits? The whole fucking thing is fitting together so well. I mean, I even have a simulation that's going to be released, sooner or later, that just makes it look, you just see it happening. You can just watch the formation, okay? You can watch charge in action. Just remember, it is every scientist's job to disprove the theory. So this is just such a big, fat fucking lie. I mean, I mean, it's an insane lie. You don't even challenge ideas like, Kip Thorne invents turning matter into bent space and calls it Einstein's theory somehow. Where was that ever documented? Where was there any analysis or debate? Where did you people debate any of that crap? I mean, you invent neutrinos and then you give them special prop. Oh, it's an electron neutrino or a proton neutrino. They can change who they are, in mid-space. I mean, you just invent crap. Okay, you invent a fable and you don't challenge each other at all. You just all jump on the bandwagons. I mean, oh, that's such a disgusting sentence. And just remember, it's every scientist's job to try to disprove the theory. No, it's every scientist's job to whitewash, to just keep making the crap, the mistakes, just embrace them all. Just let's have annihilation. Let's, antiparticles. I mean, you have no evidence, no hard evidence for any of this crap. And you'll sit there and insult other people's intelligence and tell them it's all well established and well founded. And again, the point is when you go out and look, you'll see the errors, you'll see the mistakes. You can't, to save your life, accurately describe an experiment so simple. It's a fucking slit in a material, so simple. And we watch you contrive all of this nonsense to explain, well, there's an infinite number of little wavelets that are creating another wave, and somehow they all cancel out and create 2 point sources in the wrong location. But it's really a wave. Waves. It's really 2 point sources somehow. 2 point sources in the single slit create the pattern. How do you have 2 point sources in one wave? Oh, that's right. You really can't. So you have to create another extra wave somehow. I mean, it's just so bad. There's just no, you just. I mean, again, am I supposed to believe that the emperor doesn't know he's naked, kind of thing? I mean, what is you don't realize, that you're just talking from such a weak position. You don't realize you don't have any of this hard evidence to defend any of this nonsense. There's just no point. So you won't admit that, well, it would be nice if they did the Eddington experiment from space. Maybe I'll suggest it at the next secret scientist meeting. You can't even admit how weak your evidence is, how convoluted it has become, how the math doesn't match what you draw. It's just nothing to say. So anyway, but again, open invitation. Just tell me, how much do I have to pay you to make the video? How much? Shit. All right, so this guy says, which, says it quicker than I did, obviously. He's aware of the math that works. Yes, and I'm pointing out, again, you don't have to do all of the sine theta crap. You don't have to do the vector math. You can just understand that exactly how many wavelengths are in the distance will tell you how many are going to be on the arc. It's already in there. all you have to do is multiply again times 1/2 pi to get 1/4 of the circle. It'll tell you the difference in the length of the line. The length of the line is 1/2 pi, okay, of difference between the radius and the circumference. So the difference between this length of this line, the radius, and the difference of this circumference is 1/2 pi. And so all you do is take this line, make it longer, and you'll have your number of wavelengths will be right in there. And it's all dictated by that. So there's nothing else to do. You don't need to do anything more than just increase the little notches you created in the radius by dividing the wavelength into the radius, and it'll tell you exactly how many notches are on the circumference. I don't have to do all that other crap. Yeah, anyway. You don't need waves to explain the pattern. The non-wave explanation fits the math. Well, let's understand that that's only 1/2 of the argument. 1/2 of the argument is I've certainly pointed out that alternative theories do exist and can work, and explain it simpler and more completely. All right, just as jamming is a perfectly good explanation for why in the radar or radio experiment there's a pattern. Jamming explains it. The simple statement that our radio receivers are jammed explains why there's a pattern. So you don't need any wave theory. You don't need any destructive, constructive crap. You can just blame it on the fact that we can't receive radio, that's out of phase, to the same frequency out of phase, unless you make an antenna that focuses. And that's just the truth. So it's already, their claim that they've proven waves is wrong because clearly the other explanations are still very viable. So I'm proving the viability of an alternative explanation to say you don't have nail in the coffin evidence of waves. But it goes the step further, and it clearly stating that waves is now a less credible explanation. Now the waves are in the wrong places. It doesn't have any coherency to waves. It really doesn't fit. And that fits the previous argument, the simple argument that's made that water waves don't do what light does in the single slit. And water doesn't do what light does in the double slit, or sound. That there is no evidence that there's a medium, that there's electric and magnetic fields and that they're all kind of wooey and connected to each other and all that stuff. What it's really indicating is that this is just discrete individual little particles, and they aren't tied to each other in any way whatsoever. There's no medium, no ether, there's no atmosphere, and there's no frickin' water. Okay, there's no medium. All right. You don't need waves. You could call it a wave. You could call it a wave of discrete bits of force. Right, but that would be like calling it a wave of soldiers. The soldiers aren't tied to each other. The soldiers are individual players. Or a wave of bullets. The bullets aren't tied to each other. They're individual bullets going individual vectors. But understanding that it's ultimately discrete bits of momentum. So that's the key thing. Discrete bits of momentum, not glue, not jello, not any of that crap, moving through space at 300 kilometers per second, of which photons are made of. Yes, they're composite objects, and you can break them and then remake them very simply. The pieces are all interchangeable. I can interchange one piece of a photon with the other piece, and they don't know the difference. So if I break a photon, I can just remake a new one out of the pieces. Okay, is one of the key ideas that leads to explaining and unifying all the forces. So clearly, yes, the benefit of this analysis is that it also demonstrates that if you say fuck it to waves and singularities and all that crap, you can explain magnetism and you can explain gravity. And you can put them all together in one big little place and say, look, it all fits together. And it's all just 2 + 2 + 2 physics. And you don't need anything else. Anyway, Most of the videos you can find of physicists, often quite prominent ones, talking about the double slit pattern completely fail to show and or explain the actual pattern. That's right. They don't even deal with the real pattern created. They just do the young, superficial analysis that has really nothing to do with the truth. It's just bullshit. And again, he won't admit that it's just bullshit. So, I mean, it was said in this comment. So even if he doesn't watch this video, this comment says it right there plainly. And that's the big lie. Actual pattern. I'm sure DraftScience will give his own reply as well. Well, you did very well putting it in one paragraph here. You used the word discrete bits of momentum. It explains the phenomenon just fine, simply. Again, my simple point that you can know exactly what's going to be revealed here by just understanding that your whatever the distance is, that distance is just going to be represented on that curved line, and that's all you need. You don't need to do any complex math. You just need to understand that if I tied a string, the string can only, it's going to rotate. This line will get shorter and this line will get longer, and and you can't take from one and give to the other, and those are the phases, and there's certain places they'll be in phase, out of phase, in phase, out of phase, and that's it. It's just no more complicated than that. I mean, except for the fact that, again, you have to understand the zero angle, okay? You have 90 degrees, when they're all the way this way, 90 degrees, and then you have 0. Well, the zeros are two different zeros for the 2 point sources. They're in two different locations. They don't have the same 0. All right. So anyway, read a couple of these others maybe. Do force bits interact with each other? I've been over this 7 million times. I don't know how you missed it, so I don't know what to say to you. It wouldn't matter if they did, okay, is really my argument. If they did, it makes no difference. Force can't make a difference. So if I make a universe with a bunch of force bits flying around, right, the idea is if they hit each other, this force bit flies right into this force bit, what's going to happen? Well, if they reflect, okay, there's going to be a force bit going this way and a force bit going this way. If they go right through each other, there'll be a force bit going this way and a force bit going this way. There's just no way to change the universe. It would look exactly the same if they hit or if they don't hit. It's exactly the same universe. Nothing changes. So you obviously couldn't tell if they did hit each other. Now, clearly, I'm arguing there's two kinds of force, an X force and a Y force, or whatever you want to say. So obviously, when X and Y would hit each other, well, then you could argue that the universe changes, because if X goes through Y, it should just do something that doesn't have the same appearance, right? So O, X and O. Obviously, if they go through each other, X is going to be over here and O is going to be going this way. And if they reflect, then X will be going this way and O will be going this way. And so then you'd see a different universe. But the argument could be is that all the blue bits are flying in one layer of dimension and the red bits are in another layer of dimension. The boards are just out of alignment with each other, the checkerboards, and they can never intersect. They can never hit each other. But if they hit a matter bit, the matter bit can get hit by either one. And so now the two forces can interact. So the red force and the blue force are in two separate universes, you could say. I mean, they're flying around on a different, there's layers of the universe. This one can fly in that layer. This one has to fly in this layer. The O bits are in one layer, the X bits are in another layer, so they can never hit each other. But when they interact with matter, then they can interact with each other because it'll move the matter, and the matter moving will create different interactions. But I'm just saying the force bits do not interact with the force bits. Use the simple rule. You can never bend a force with a force. You can't change a force with a force. You can't hit a laser beam with a laser beam and bend the laser beams. Clearly, forces do not interact with forces in any way that changes anything in the universe. It's only when forces interact with matter, electrons and protons, that the universe can change. All right. And if so, do they create any turbulence? No. I mean, you people just can't let go of it, right? You just can't let go of this wooey swirly crap. You just got to find wooey swirly crap everywhere. No, it's a mechanical, dead, it's just dominoes. It's not hard to follow it along, okay? And it's just, if it ever looks wooey, if dominoes ever look wooey, you can kind of see the unwooiness if you just look a little bit. It sort of looks like a wave a little bit, but you can see, oh yeah, it's just individual dominoes. Got it. The reason for the question has to do with how celestial orbits work. Well, that's sort of a fancy word. Celestial orbits. Woo. No, it's orbits, period. Okay, orbits are just created because of gravity. All right, the concept is pretty simple. You push something from the outside and it gets stuck orbiting. That's not that complicated. So, using celestial, it just makes it sound like it's a special kind of orbit. It's pretty easy, even with an amateur like me, to understand the mechanics of force bits in a smaller environment. Yeah, I don't know what this. This is, you're going to say something just too stupid here, right? Okay, but on the universal scale, it's a bit tougher. Why? It's just different sized light bulbs. I mean, you can understand a light bulb, right? Shining light, photons coming off. The sun is doing the same thing. The force coming off. It's not that complicated. And the sun has the catch of, there's a bunch of stuff moving inside of it that's absorbing energy. So there's a net energy pull into the sun because there's less push coming out of the sun. So the sun's producing light, but, okay, that's pushing out. But the photons it's pushing out are a lot less than the gravity it's consumed, the energy it's consumed. All right. It's a bit tougher to connect the dots over such large distances. Well, I think the dots seem pretty obvious. The rest of the universe is pretty dull and uninteresting. It's just a bunch of big crap swirling around each other, crashes into each other now and then, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't seem all that fucking fantastic to me. Did Lesage or anyone... So again, why should I have to speak for Lesage? I mean, the idea of push gravity is all it is, and it's not that complicated, right? I mean, push gravity is not that complicated a concept, right? So it's not really Lesage's, it's not really Fadio's, it's just anybody rational who says pulls are pretty much impossible, so obviously it has to be a push force. But I don't really have much interest in speaking for Lesage, and again, Lesage wasn't even the guy who invented it, Fadio did. So, I mean, it's just whatever. But go ahead, play this stupid fucking game. Or anyone else come up with a mechanical model for mechanical gravity that could be used to compare or predict the orbits of far out planets and comets and such? Well, of course it does. All of that's Newton. It's the inverse square law, for fuck's sake. That's all Newton gave you, really. He just pointed out the obvious. Look, it's the inverse square law. Okay, it's just like there was a bunch of little stuff flying out of it. It's just like a light bulb, except it's the reverse. There's less stuff flying out of it. And there's more stuff behind you, so you get pushed into it at a certain rate. And the rate will depend on how much wind you catch in your sail. How big is your sail? How many electrons and protons do you have? Well, the more electrons and protons you have, the more wind you catch, the more you get blown. Not that complicated. I just figured, so of course Fadio and Lesage couldn't do any of that because they didn't know any of that, they didn't know the speed of light, they didn't know all of these conditions. Anyway, I just figured that if someone were able to mathematically quantify the effects of mechanical gravity and then use that model to better predict, well, again, there's the only prediction that Newton left out was an understanding that the sun might be precessing the center of the sun's gravity. And the speed of light and the speed of gravity. So again, we know that all the errors in Newton, most all of them, are fixed by just recognizing the speed of light. That fixes a huge number of errors. Just fixing the idea that the observations are always a little bit behind. So you fix that, you fix a lot of Newton's errors. And then when you do the speed of gravity thing, you also fix a few more. But the real key thing is to recognize, the sun's precessing. The center of the sun's gravity is not in one location because the sun is being pulled by all the other crap too. It's a little tiny bit of pull, but obviously the sun's a very big thing, a very powerful gravitational source in our solar system, and any movement in it, its center of gravity moves a few hundred feet, it means something, especially means something to any planet that's very close. All right, quantity that affects the mechanical gravity, and let's use this model to better predict or at least match the results of Einstein's calculations. So we know Einstein's calculations are insanely convoluted. Nobody does them. So what you think it's a great calculation, this gamma factor. I could just say it's not a gamma factor, it's a precession of the sun factor, and it's exactly the same thing. I mean, all I have to do is process the sun some arbitrary amount, 15 degrees, let's just say it processes, it moves from this point to this point, 3 miles. Okay, it moves 3 miles back and forth. And then just see what the effect on Mercury would be. And then I just make it process enough to affect Mercury. And the fact is that equation will work because the weakness, the fact that gravity gets weaker over distance means it won't affect Venus at all, right? Venus is so much further away than Mercury that no matter how, I can move the sun's center of gravity to fix Mercury and it won't affect Venus at all. So I can do the same thing. I just replace gamma with the sun's precession, the precession of the sun's center of mass. The mainstream physics community would then have no choice but to take it just as seriously as curved space. So again, this isn't the argument. The argument is curved space doesn't work in 3 dimensions. It has to be understood as a convergence. It has to be understood as a light bulb. We don't talk about light and say the space is curved. That's why there's an inverse square law. Nobody does that. Nobody thinks the photons are flying through curved space and that's why there's an inverse square law. In 3 dimensions, you either push or you pull, and that's it. There's just push and pull. There's nothing else. And pull is illogical and nonsensical. It can't be made elemental. Pull can't be elemental. Push is obviously elemental. Banging 2 things into each other is as elemental as you can possibly even get or imagine or anything. Pull is not. There, we're done. It's a push universe. Push works. You don't need to sit there and create convoluted math to represent this theory. We already know Einstein fails because we know it's not bent space. We know in 3 dimensions he's describing a vacuum cleaner. You can know that a vacuum cleaner in the center of every single atomic particle is a retarded analogy. It's a silly thing to even imagine. So why are you imagining it? It's retarded, it's dumb, it's silly, it's nonsensical. Why even bother defending Einstein? It starts with a phony, fake, silly premise. Every piece of matter is a vacuum cleaner. That's retarded. It's so fucking 3 blind mice, 3 pigs. It's a fable. It's silly. The elemental function is vacuum cleaning. I mean, maybe women might think that. Okay, they might think vacuum cleaner is the elemental function of the universe. But I think a rational person's going to know that, nah, that's not the elemental function. That's as silly as saying jellyfish. Anyway, tween toe, probably positive comment, irrelevant. Sorry, no, not irrelevant. Your working model is best I've seen. Yeah, well, that's damn true. Best I've seen, that's for sure. I don't even know what this means. You have a necrotic itch going on. I don't even know what the fuck that could possibly mean. I think we'll just block them because that doesn't make any sense. Oh, this guy was a nutter. So this is a flat earther who showed up. I don't agree with Tesla and Wheeler. Yes, well, I don't think Wheeler thinks the earth is flat. On the scientists being deep thinkers, I'm agreeing with you on this. As William Shatner said, it's science and science fiction are the same. Well, that's just silly. Especially when it comes to the physicists and the theories they pass off as fact. Question. You claim Ken has no evidence, yet I see no evidence of any kind from you either. Well, that's just a lie, okay? I mean, I took the ferrocell and I put the fluid under a microscope and I showed how the pattern is and I showed that it's not doing any of the crap he says is happening. So these are just, you can say that crap shit fuckhead, but that's not the truth. Mechanical systems, no magic or spirits or ghosts. LOL. Guessing you're an atheist. Yeah, of course I am. I'm not a fableist. I don't believe in gremlins and boogeymen and Sasquatches. I mean, you're a little Sasquatchy, but no, I don't think you're a real Sasquatch. You're just a deluded kook. Okay? I mean, you're an antiist. Okay? For some dopey reason. The world's not good enough, and then so you decide to bury yourself in even a deeper pile of shit. I mean, regular human civilization is shit, but where you're digging a hole is even shittier, retard. Anyway, goodbye. Ugh, these pathetic morons everywhere. Such a sad, sad world. People keep having these morons as babies. I'm gonna raise myself a flat earther. Shit. Alright, what is it with humans and storytelling? Yeah, well, it's just all about lying, is all it is. I'm a very good driver. Very good. Alright, Dunning-Kruger again. Yeah, well, that's what all the physicists have. So Ken Wheeler, again, regular physics is just as bad. It's just as silly a story. So anyway, I don't even know what this is. Bryn Gates Davis Apprentice. Whatever that even. What the fuck could any of that crap mean? Sorry. Type some sort of rational statements, please. Fuck. Alright. So anyway, till the next time and such. Ugh. Just so tedious. Yeah. Alright, anyway, till the next time. La 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 la. And such.